Type "how to budget" into a search engine, open any entry-level financial book, and you will almost certainly be handed the exact same formula. This diagram represents the ubiquitous 50-30-20 rule. You take your after-tax income and divide it into 3 clean buckets: half for your mandatory needs, 30% for your discretionary wants, and 20% for savings and paying off debt. It is universally taught because it is incredibly easy to understand. 3 simple categories, clean round numbers, and barely any upfront math required to get a working baseline. But this mathematical model was introduced in 2005, and the middle-class economy it was built to measure does not look anything like the economy we operate in today. 2 decades ago, this math worked for a large portion of the country. Housing costs were relatively stable, wage growth was predictable, and things like healthcare premiums and student loan payments took up a much smaller fraction of a household's take-home pay. When the input numbers of 2026 no longer fit the boxes defined in 2005, the framework stops being a helpful guide and starts creating a gap between the plan and the reality of modern life. Looking closely at this 50% allocation for needs, we can see exactly where the framework breaks down. The underlying costs to simply exist have mutated. Median home prices and rents have climbed aggressively for 20 years, while median wages have remained relatively stagnant. For millions of people, housing alone consumes a massive chunk of this allotted space. Add in the normalized financial burdens of modern life, compounding student loan payments, and escalating out-of-pocket healthcare deductibles, and the container is completely full. We also have to account for categorical expansion. The actual definition of a mandatory need has grown to include expenses that either didn't exist or were entirely optional 20 years ago. High-speed internet and smartphones are mandatory survival requirements today. You cannot apply for a job, submit your daily schoolwork, or access your bank without them. Because the basic entry fee to participate in society is higher, the modern needs category naturally overflows its 50% limit before you can even look at discretionary spending or savings. There is a deeper structural flaw in how we think about these ratios, known as the percentage fallacy. Flat allocation rules assume that expenses will scale evenly across different income levels. This visualization compares a high-income household against a lower-income household, paying for the exact same fixed dollar costs. The blocks being extracted are identical in size, but they consume a vastly different proportion of the total pool. A household earning $40,000 a year does not pay half as much for basic groceries, winter utilities, or car insurance as a household earning $80,000. The dollar cost of those baseline necessities remains flat. For middle and lower income brackets, covering these fixed necessities easily pushes the needs category to 65 or 70% of total take-home pay. This creates a cascading failure. When the necessities consume 70% of the total, the capital meant for dining out, hobbies, or building an emergency fund is instantly crushed. When someone at a lower income level tries to follow this allocation and fails, they usually feel a deep sense of personal financial guilt. But they aren't failing the budget. The rigid percentage rule is failing them. Moving past this guilt requires abandoning the idea of a universal percentage rule. A working budget has to be a personalized, functional system based on actual behavior. Zero-based budgeting assigns every incoming dollar a specific job until the balance is zero. Reverse budgeting tracks actual spending patterns to build a realistic baseline. Values-based budgeting routes capital toward high-priority categories like education, ruthlessly cutting areas that don't align. Regardless of the specific method you choose, a modern budget requires 4 basic things: tracking granular categories, planning for irregular expenses, recording your actual monthly spend, and adjusting the numbers dynamically. The 50-30-20 rule still has some utility. If you are a total beginner who has never tracked a dollar in your life, it is a clean, simple mental model to start with. That true financial stability in a modern economy requires replacing those rigid historical formulas with granular systems that adapt to the reality of your specific life.